Hey guys. So this recording is for my scholars who are usually a high four, maybe a five or a six. And we want to push them to a seven or an eight, but they can move at their own pace. So congratulations if you're listening to this recording, you're one of my better writers. I thought this way you could listen to the parts you want to listen to. You can fast forward through the parts you don't need, and maybe we can go a little bit in depth since your writing won't have a lot of the things that maybe some of the other scholars will be working on. So I'm going to walk you through it. You should have a rubric in front of you. You should also have post-it notes. If at any time you have any questions about something I'm describing in this video, please write it on the post-it note and keep moving through at your own pace, and I will come check in with you when we have a break in instruction. But like I said, this is to get you to the seven or eight place. If you read it, someone who has a seven or eight in writing, they integrate specific references, techniques, or rhetorical devices to the text to support thesis and has a particularly sophisticated voice and style. These references are blended smoothly. They also exhibit control of grammar, spelling, mechanics, and word choice that is flawless. So this is criterion D, using language. Today we're focusing on editing, which is looking at grammar and the words we use, less on the ideas and the arguments we're making, which is more revising. So first thing first, we are going to look at formatting. Please feel free to fast forward ahead if you're already here. But we are formatting in the MLA format, so you need to have your last name and page number in the top right page. I will delete mine so I can show you how to do it if you are not aware. You go to Insert, Header Page Number. Page number, make sure it's the one in the upper right hand corner. It should, usually when it does it, it puts it over here. So if it puts it to the left side, it actually puts it to the left and up. Make sure you press enter to make it go down. And then type in your last name, capitalized correctly, of course, and go ahead and tab it all the way into the far right hand corner. Once you do that, it should be in the same position with a different page number on every page of your document. Like I said, make sure you remember to press tab so that it goes down a line. If you don't yet have your last name and page number at the top of your page, go ahead and pause this video now and do that. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is our header. Your header should of course be your first and last name capitalized correctly. My name, not Lyles, not Jillian Lyles, just Miss Lyles, capitalized correctly. English 2 capitalized correctly, and then the date with the day, the month, and then the year in that format. If you do not yet have and the header should be double spaced. If you do not have a header, go ahead and pause me now so you can write in your own header. Okay, the next thing you should have is a title. The title should be just one line down, and then it should be in the center, so you can just press the center align button. That will put your title in the center. Your title should be fully capitalized except for any prepositions. So prepositions are of, in, a the, if it's in the middle of your title, anything like that, but otherwise it should be capitalized. My title is The Power of a Story, because that is what I am arguing makes the poem To This Day so powerful. You should feel free to title your poetry analysis anything creatively that you want. Please do not title it Poetry Analysis, Analysis of 59, 59. I really want you to take this time to come up with something creative. Go ahead and pause this video now to create a title and make sure it is capitalized and centered correctly. Okay, and the last part of formatting, if you are listening to this video, that's because you should have your 4 paragraphs already typed up. You shouldn't be doing any more revising at this point. Go ahead and highlight everything, your whole poem and your title, and make sure it is in Times New Roman, 12-point font, and you put it in double space by going to the line spacing with the lines with the arrow and make sure it's in double. Make sure if it says remove space before paragraph or remove space after paragraph, you click on that so everything is just double spaced. And then finally, make sure your text is left aligned. Everything but that title. That title should be centered, but the rest of your paper should be left aligned. For some reason, I'm walking around and I'm seeing a lot of your papers that are centered, and we don't want our whole paper centered. If your paper is not in 12-point Times New Roman font, go ahead and do that now. Okay, the first thing you should read your paper and check for, I'm hoping that many of you guys don't have this, but this is definitely like a big red flag if I see this. Everything in your paper should be capitalized correctly. So you guys are writing about Primetime Loving or 59. I don't really care what you call the poem, but it should be capitalized correctly and it should be in quotation marks. That's how we're doing it. So you're going to want to make sure in your poem, anytime you say Primetime Loving or anytime you say 59, it is both capitalized correctly and in quotation marks. And then you're going to want to make sure that Harry Baker is always capitalized. So just like Shane Croizan is capitalized, Harry Baker should be capitalized in your paper. Go ahead and pause me now if you want to check your capitalizations. Okay, so the next thing you should be looking for, so we are going to actually be looking on the rubric under 7 and 8, control of grammar, spelling mechanics, word choice is flawless. We're going to look at that part first because it's the easier of the two parts to look at. So how you should do this, or how I do it, because most of you are good enough writers to also do it in this way, you should be reading your whole poetry analysis out loud because you're much better at hearing grammatical errors than you are at saying them out loud. And some things you're going to want to check for when you're reading things out loud. This is where you're checking for missing words, punctuation, word choice, and clarity. So missing words, anytime you read something out loud, you should be able to hear if a word is missing. Punctuation, anywhere you naturally pause when you read, you should add a comma or a period or a semicolon or a colon. And then clarity, do your sentences sound correctly? So while you're reading this out loud quietly to yourself, you really want to make sure you're exaggerating it as much as possible. I'm not going to read my whole poetry analysis for you. I'm just going to read the first paragraph. So the power behind the poem To This Day by Shane Croizan. Okay, so when I read that, to me it sounds like there should be a comma here. So then it would read, the power behind the poem To This Day by Shane Croizan is that it is told by a survivor. To This Day by Shane Croizan is a narrative free verse poem that details Croizan's own experience with bullying. So when I read that out loud, that sounded very repetitive to me. It wasn't good word choice. I already said by Shane Croizan here. I don't think I need to say To This Day by Shane Croizan again. So I'm going to go back and read it from the beginning. The power behind the poem To This Day by Shane Croizan is that it is told by a survivor. To This Day is a narrative free verse poem that details Croizan's own experience with bullying. The poem begins with him telling the story of how, when he was a child, he accidentally became part of a domestic violence investigation when he told a school official that his grandma gave him karate chops, a fun name he called pork chops. So I'm looking at this sentence right here. Reading that out loud, that sentence sounds very wordy to me. It sounds a little confusing if you didn't already know the poem. Especially it says the poem begins with him telling the story of how when he was a child, he accidentally became part of a domestic violence investigation when he told a school official that his grandma gave him karate chops, a fun name he called pork chops. So it gets wordy here and it gets confusing here. So I bolded it so you could see it, and I'm going to rewrite the sentence after the sentence I wrote because I really want to see what I was trying to say while I'm clarifying it. So I like the poem begins. It tells you what part of the poem I'm talking about. But the poem begins with Croizan's retelling of, the poem begins with him telling the story of how, the poem begins with Croizan's retelling of the time he accidentally became part of a domestic violence investigation Kozan mistakenly, because I don't want to use accidentally again. But I don't like mistakenly because it wasn't a mistake that he said it. Kozan, in his childish innocence, told the school official that his grandma gave him karate chops. A fun name he called pork chops. Okay, so the poem begins with Kozan's retelling of the time he accidentally became part of a domestic violence investigation. Kozan, in his childish innocence, told the school official that his grandma gave him karate chops, a fun name he called pork chops, right? That sounds way better. It's a lot clearer than my first one. I understand that Kozan retold this story. I understand the accident, like how he mistakenly became part of a investigation, but it's a lot clearer. And even adding this childish innocence part, I was able to communicate something that wasn't in my first sentence. So I'm going to delete that first sentence. Because of this, he spent a large part of his childhood being called pork chops. Kozan goes on to detail the bullying experience of others before clearly stating that although these experiences are still common, people simply need to look a little closer, stare a little longer, in order to see the beauty in themselves. What makes this poem so compelling, so powerful to the reader or the listener is that it is the first-person experience of someone who overcame the obstacles of bullying to see the beauty in themselves and in others. Okay, so if I'm looking at this, what makes this poem so compelling, so powerful? So this is my argument, this is my thesis, and I'm rereading it. Once again, it sounds a little wordy, maybe not a little clear. So what makes this poem so compelling, so powerful to the reader or listener? I think I'm going to delete to the reader or listener. If I'm saying something's powerful, it affects everyone. I don't need to clarify that it only affects the reader. In fact, that kind of dilutes my message. So what makes this poem so compelling, so powerful, is that it is the first-person experience of someone who overcame the obstacle of bullying to see the beauty in themselves and in others. So I like that. It's a lot. I think it's stronger than the first time I did it. So one more time, I'm going to read the whole paragraph. Like I said, I'm not going to have you guys listen as I edit my whole paragraph or my whole essay. But what you should do is you should do it line by line, paragraph by paragraph, and then at the end go through and read the whole thing. So the power behind the poem, To This Day, by Shawn Kozan, is that it is told by a survivor. To This Day is a narrative-free verse poem that details Kozan's own experience with bullying. The poem begins with Kozan's retelling of the time he accidentally became part of a domestic violence investigation. Kozan, in his childhood innocence, told the school official that his grandma gave him karate chops, a fun name he called pork chops. Because of this, he spent a large part of his childhood being called pork chops. Kozan goes on to detail the bullying experience of others before clearly stating that although these experiences are still common, people simply need to look a little closer, stare a little longer, in order to see the beauty in themselves. What makes this poem so compelling, so powerful, is that it is the first-person experience of someone who overcame the obstacles of bullying to see the beauty in themselves and in others. Okay, so see, that last time reading it, I see two things. One, people simply, nothing about Kozan's poem To This Day gives the message that overcoming bullying is simple or easy. He says it's something that you should do, but he definitely talks about the struggles of bullying. So I don't think it's simply. So I would say Kozan goes on to detail the bullying experience of others before clearly stating that although these experiences are still common, people need to look a little closer, stare a little longer in order to see the beauty in themselves. What makes this poem so compelling, so powerful, is that it is the first-person experience of someone who overcame the obstacles of bullying to see the beauty in themselves and in others. In others sounds very repetitive because I said it somewhere else in this section. So I'm actually going to change to see the beauty in themselves and in those around them. So that's a pretty good paragraph. It's clearer. So as you guys saw, I edited for missing words. I edited for punctuation and clarity and actually syntax when I rewrote my sentence. And I edited for word choice, like how I deleted simply. At this point in time, you should read your analysis to yourself out loud. I should hear mumbles. And listen for those things. Are you really saying what you want? Is there a place where you could be clearer? Is there a place where you could use stronger language? Is there a place where you could either connect your sentences or separate your sentences to really make sure you're saying what you want? So go ahead and pause the tape now and go through that process. If you have any questions, please write them on a Post-it note and I will come check for you. Okay, now that you did that, we are going to look at one more thing. So we're going to look at transitions. Transitions is actually part of criterion B. Oh, excuse me, not one more thing. We still have to look at rhetorical devices, but anyways, transitions is part of criterion B in organization. It literally, if you look in the 7 or 8, it says utilizes an effective and mature system of organization, topic sentence that relates to thesis, transitions, etc. So I am going to continue to edit my paper showing you how I would edit for transitions. I, of course, will not make you reread my first paragraph again with me. I'll just reread that first sentence. But what makes this poem so compelling, so powerful, is that it is the first person experience of someone who overcame the obstacles of bullying to see the beauty in themselves and in those around them. Shane Kozan uses first person point of view to make it clear to the reader that he too was a bully and experienced all of the same pain as kids going. He wasn't a bully. He too was bullied and experienced all the same pain as kids going through similar situations today. So a transition is a word that tells you where in the story you are. So first, second, although, in addition to, on the other hand, in conclusion, those are all transitional words that help your reader follow where you are. So here I would say one of the strongest devices used by Shane Kozan is first person point of view. This stylistic choice so one of the strongest devices used by Kozan. So I'm very much saying like this is where my evidence lies. I could also have said first, Shane Kozan uses first person point of view. Evidence of this evidence of this of the strength of using first of evidence of telling a story is right. One of the first things he uses. Sorry, I had to pause the video. I got a little distracted by the cleaning people. But yeah, so some of the things you could see, you could say are one of the strongest devices used by Shane Kozan. An example, evidence of the strength of telling a story is when Shane Kozan uses. I would suggest if you need a list of transition words, I printed them out. Otherwise, you could Google them. But you want to make sure you're putting them in your writing to really demonstrate the strength of that. So let's look at my second body paragraph so I can see that. Another device. Oh, look, I already had it. Another device that supports Kozan's personal inspiring message is his use of figurative language, right? I'm saying like this is another body paragraph that is supporting my argument. One example is a transition. I could add, if I look at my Shane Kozan's use, so I could say, in conclusion, to summarize, to wrap it all up, right? That's really a good place in your last paragraph to use a transition word to kind of illustrate to your reader like how you're moving through your argument. if you I would take this time to go through your own writing and see where you could add transitions. I would encourage you to not just look at the beginning of your paragraphs, but look throughout your paragraph. Just like how here I said, another device that supports Kozan's personal inspiring message is his use of figurative language, specifically his use of symbolism. His use of symbolism is what makes his experience, his bullying, real for the reader. One example of Kozan's use of symbolism, right? One example is a transition. I would encourage you to see where you can add transitions throughout your paper to help your reader really follow your argument. I would pause me now and go through and add at least 3 transitions into your own poetry analysis. Okay, and the last thing I'm going to ask you to look at is integrate specific references, techniques, or rhetorical devices to the text to support thesis and has a particularly sophisticated voice and style. These references are blended smoothly. So rhetorical devices are really figurative language. That's what that's asking for. Do you go above and beyond in your language choice to communicate your message to your reader? I would say as kind of advanced writers, you should pick 2 places in your reading, in your own writing, where you think you could use more rhetorical devices. So one place I'm going to look at it is my first sentence. The power behind the poem to this day by Shane Kozan is that it is told by a survivor. So I want to make this more realistic, more real for my reader. So something I might say is, I might speak about how it pulls you in. So like this is a hook, right? When we're telling you guys to make a hook, what we're actually looking for is a rhetorical device. So sadness, isolation. Oh, Omar would find this hilarious. I don't know how to spell sadness. Sadness, isolation, and defeat are all feelings, are all encompassing feelings that the listener experiences when hearing Shane Kozan's to this day for the first time. Sadness, isolation, and defeat are all encompassing feelings that the listener experiences when hearing Shane Kozan's to this day for the first time. This poem is powerful. This poem is powerful because it makes the listener feel what a victim of bullying feels. The power behind the poem to this day by Shane Kozan is that it is told by a survivor. Where does this power come from? Okay, so sadness, isolation, and defeat are all encompassing feelings that the listener experiences when hearing Shane Kozan's to this day for the first time. This poem is powerful because it makes the listener feel what a victim of bullying feels. So I'm thinking that's a little wordy, right? When you're adding rhetorical devices, you really want to make your reader feel what you feel. You want to make your reader envision what you envision. And when I'm looking at this is 3 sentences, so this is a little wordy. So maybe I'll look back at it. Sadness, isolation, and defeat. All emotions, a victim of bullying feels and all emotions a listener of Shane Koyczan's to this day. Sadness, isolation, and defeat. All emotions a victim of bullying feels, and all emotions a listener of Shane Koyczan's to this day experiences. No. Sadness, isolation, and defeat. All emotions a victim of bullying feels, and all emotions a. So when I read that the first time, a listener feels, that was very passive. If I'm saying Shane Koyczan's message is powerful, I want to say he did it, right? So I'm trying to think like rhetorically, how am I going to pull my reader in and instantly make them think like, oh man, if I've never heard this poem before, I need to go listen to it. That sounds awesome. That sounds powerful, right? Because that is my argument. This poem is powerful. Sadness, isolation, defeat, all emotions a victim of bullying feels, and all emotions is able to make his listener in his poem to this day. The power behind So now that I added that, this to this day by Shane Koyczan is repetitive. The power behind this spoken word is that it is told by a survivor. To this day is a narrative free verse poem. Wait, so sadness, isolation, and defeat, all emotions a victim of bullying feels, and all emotions Shane Koyczan is able to make his listener feel in his poem to this day. Right? That's a lot more powerful. It is a rhetorical device to start with that list, to really pull my reader in, to make them think. So before they even get to this part, they think like, huh, how does he make them do that if they've never heard the poem before? Like, oh man, wow, that's pretty impressive that an author could make someone feel that. I wonder how he does it. If they've already heard the poem, they should be thinking at this point, I wonder how Jillian Lyles thinks Shane Koyczan does that. So, sadness, isolation, and defeat, all emotions a victim of bullying feels, and all emotions Shane Koyczan is able to make his listener feel in his poem to this day. The power behind the spoken word is that it is told by a survivor. To this day, I'm going to add one more. It is powerful. And that power satisfaction and defeat, all emotions a victim of bullying feels, and all emotions Shane Koyczan is able to make his listener feel in his poem to this day. It is powerful. The power behind this spoken word is that it is told by a survivor. Okay, so I'm going to, if you understand what I'm saying about rhetorical devices, please feel free to stop the recording now and look at your own work. Like I said, you should strive for 2 other parts in your own poetry analysis where you can use more rhetorical language. If you'd like to see me choose another example, I will explain that now. So I'm going to find a place where I think I can be more rhetorical. This use of a circus to symbolize, I'm going to choose my 3rd body paragraph. So let's just read it through once. My second body paragraph. Another device that supports Koyczan's personal inspiring message is his use of figurative language, specifically his use of symbolism. His use of symbolism is what makes his experience, his bullying, real for the reader. One example of Koyczan's use of symbolism is his comparison of high school to a circus. The poem reads, every school was like a big top circus tent, and the pecking order went from acrobats to lion tamers, from clowns to carnies. We were freaks, lobster-clawed boys, and bearded ladies. This use of a circus to symbolize high school helps the reader understand the inevitability and crushing despair those who are bullied feel. No one wants to be a lobster-clawed boy or bearded lady. While popular students are acrobats, lion tamers, and clowns who can take off their makeup and costumes, the bullied are lobster-clawed boys and bearded ladies. So this right here is really an example of rhetorical language because it is figurative. I am adopting Koyczan's own metaphor in my own writing to make the argument. And I continue it. They cannot escape the circus. They cannot escape the reality of being different, of being bullied. The very fact that Kozan uses such a clear symbol demonstrates to the reader that he has personal experience in this circus. He knows what it feels like to be a lobster clawed boy, and therefore he is uniquely suited to tell the reader that bullying is a reality, but that everyone is beautiful and they can learn to see it in themselves. I would say, I could go back and say, this use of a circus to symbolize high school helps the reader understand the inevitability and crushing despair those who are bullied feel. No one wants to be a lobster clawed boy or bearded lady. Because the ridicule is inescapable. And no one wants to be a lobster clawed boy or a bearded lady because the ridicule is inescapable. No matter how much the lobster clawed boy wants to violently remove the hands that make him different, or the bearded lady wants to shave the hair from her face, they cannot escape themselves, and they cannot escape the circus. Okay, so if you look back on this, no one wants to be a lobster clawed boy or bearded lady because the ridicule is inescapable. No matter how much the lobster clawed boy wants to violently cut. Let me look up synonyms for cut. I don't like any of those. Where's thesaurus.com? So when you're doing rhetorical devices, you really want to make sure you're using that very specific word choice, that very specific language. Carve, cleave, dissect. Slice, incision. No, it's a, here we go, verb. Carve, slash, amputate. Ah, good word choice. So no matter how much the lobster clawed boy wants to amputate, right? Because amputate implies violence. Amputate the claws from his claws. Or the bearded lady wants to, I need a better word for shave. Peel, slash, right? That's violent. Or the bearded lady wants to slash, no, doesn't work. Trim. Decorticate. Like it. Decorticate the hair from her face, it is impossible. I don't need this part. Okay, so if you go back and look at it, this is the part I just added. So no one wants to be a lobster clawed boy or bearded lady because the ridicule is inescapable. No matter how much the lobster clawed boy wants to amputate his claws or the bearded lady wants to decorticate the hair from her face, it is impossible. They cannot escape the circus. They cannot escape the reality of being different, of being bullied. So when I'm looking for rhetorical devices and style, it's going back and really making sure that like I'm using figurative language, that I'm explaining something in the strongest way possible. So this is something that like would really take hours. I'm not asking you to look at your whole paper and do it. I'm asking you to just take like 2 places and see if you could use like some similes or some metaphors or some hyperboles, rhetorical questions, parallelism, any of these devices to really make your reading stronger. Okay, so that's really all I have for you. Making sure that your writing is in the proper format, making sure you edit for, sorry, I'm totally blanking. Make sure you edit for word choice, punctuation, correct capitalization, and then clarity, and then making sure you go back and add the figurative language. So you should be able to stop it right now and look at it. That is the end of your video. If you finished early, please raise your hand, or sorry, please write on a Post-it note if you have any questions for me. Otherwise, you can go ahead and submit your poetry analysis. You are done. I hope that you got yourself a 7 or an 8, actually.